few minutes from now, we will be having the presentation of the midterm budget review right here in the August House, the National Assembly of the Republic of Namibia, presented by the Minister of Finance and Public Enterprises, Honorable Iipumbu Shiimi. My name is Ricardo Magosip, and a very good afternoon to you, and welcome now to another special edition coming to you from the courtyard here at Parliament. Well, yesterday we, of course, arrived at the venue to have the midterm budget review announcement, the statement, of course, being presented by the Minister of Finance. Unfortunately, due to a quorum not being met, the House could not conduct a session, and the Minister was unable to present yesterday. According to the National Assembly standing rules and orders in terms of how it functions, according to number 53, a quorum is required for an important sitting, particularly where voting is required. Now, in terms of that, the requirement is about 49 members to be present, except for the presiding officer or the Speaker of the House, which is not counted as part of the number that forms the quorum. But yesterday, unfortunately, we only had about 39 members of Parliament present here, with a shortage of about 10 members of Parliament in order for the session to continue. And as per rules, they're only allowed to wait the parliamentary administration for about 30 minutes, and thereafter they will have to adjourn the session and put it forth for the next day for it to take place. And hopefully, of course, as we arrived here over the last hour, we've seen MPs trickling in numbers. It looks like we will probably have a session this afternoon, but we are still waiting, of course, for that instruction. But in the meantime, I'm joined here by Mrs. Chantal Hasselman, who's a senior country partner of PwC, to just reflect a little bit on what could be the potential expectations and just generally the importance of this midterm budget review in the middle of the financial year. A very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for making time out to join us.
Good afternoon, Ricardo. Good afternoon to our viewers, and thanks for having me again.
Looks like we're doing a double whammy this time around.
Yes, so definitely they say important messages you must repeat 7 times, so we won't complain on the second time.
100%, so we've got 5 more chances still left.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. Nonetheless, I just quickly wanted to just take a step back. Like I mentioned yesterday, really, I think for many a times, for people like you and myself that have been exposed to this for so many years, we understand the key messaging, the key concepts. But for the layman on the streets, it's often difficult for them to put this sort of events in context. Can we just reflect a little bit on the purpose of having a midterm budget review in the middle of the financial year?
It is important, as with our personal finance as well, it is important to have that check-in. And this is the formal governance process of a continuation of that conversation that was started by delivering the February 24-25 budget address. In the sense that we now have 6 months into the fiscal year, and it is the opportunity in order to relook at what is relevant, where needs are expressed, and also to give forth how did 23-24 play out. Because in February when the speech was delivered, those were estimates. But what we can expect later today is a reflection by Honourable Minister in terms of the actuals attained for the 23-24 fiscal year. We can also expect a continuation of the conversation in terms of major reforms, where we are on that, as well as where we are in terms of revenue collection, where we are in terms of expenditure execution, which are important key milestones in terms of ending the 24-25th year as per the initially tabled budget.
Well, in terms of the focus, of course, at the beginning of the year, the theme of the national budget statement was really built around the legacy of the late president, of course, the time of his untimely demise as well. It was really the period where we have the tabling of the appropriation bill, opening of Parliament, and so forth. So that honor being provided to him as well. It makes you want to take a step back and just reflect on some of the key, his fiscal policy positions during his time. If you can look at just a brief reflection and some highlights that we can take away, particularly starting off in the first administration that he had since 2015.
Well, there were, to start off, there were definitely, you would agree with me, there were many challenges to overcome, in the sense that it was also a time in which we had a contraction in terms of the mining sector as well as the agricultural sector, experiencing almost similar drought conditions in 2016 to what we are experiencing at present. And obviously the fiscal policy having to support the current realities, and that led straight into the pandemic and the impact of the pandemic.
All right. I'll just have an indication here that we are definitely going to be having this session, that special seating where the Minister of Finance and Public Enterprise is expected now to deliver the midterm budget review statement. We're going to be crossing into the chamber to hear from the presiding officer.
All his people. This all we pray in the name of Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Affirmation. I solemnly affirm that I will be faithful to the Republic of Namibia and its people, and I solemnly promise to uphold and defend the Constitution and the laws of the Republic of Namibia to the best of my ability. Welcome back. Well, we're not quite there, and it is sorry. This is not a joke. I'm not joking. I didn't say that in a form of a joke. I said that in a form of seriousness. First of all, it is once we drift the way we are, then we loses. I don't want even to go further than that. We loses everything. Why do we have to squeeze in our meeting and not start 2:30 precisely? I've been a member of this house way back. I used to sit somewhere there, and we used to start precisely 2:30 on time. But we've been drifting to a point where we hardly start on time. We loses half an hour. That goes. It's a question of accountability. We should account to ourselves to make sure those of us who are members of this house are here on time. Why do I have to put you in a wheelbarrow to push you into the house as if you don't have a commitment? I believe we're all here as members of parliament with commitment to be here when we decide to be here. So remember, honestly, we are here, 47, we are short less than 2 necessary. Now, and you know, can we repeat what happened yesterday? Is it not enough form of embarrassment? I cannot believe it. I cannot believe it. Anyway, I'm told there are people in the restaurant. So I hope the 2 members are there, because otherwise this would be the biggest embarrassment I ever witnessed. Anyway, let's keep our fingers crossed. It is already after the hour. We give ourselves the usual time of 5 minutes to ring the bell. Yes? Yes, please. Yes?
I'm just afraid that we might violating the law or our rules, but I can indicate there are 2 people who are coming, but not in the restaurant, but they are coming. Within 7 minutes they will be here.
No, we are governed by rules, my dear friend. If you tell me someone is going to rock up here, the question I'm going to ask you when. And if you are not able to confirm that, we cannot defend that in terms of our rules. Yes, please.
Yes, Honorable Speaker, Honorable Members. Honorable Speaker, what if we continue with the business of the House as a work, because we do have a working quorum, but when it comes to put the questions or where it's required to vote, we hold that until we have the voting quorum. But the working, we continue.
For the people that is the first time, there should be quorum.
Yeah, Speaker, it's first and foremost, thank you. Rather very unfortunate, but I thought in line of what my brother proposed and with what Chief Whip is saying, I think it's in your ambit just to alter the order paper so that we start with the orders of the day, because that required number is there. And then when the 2, as indicated, are there, we revert back to the notice of the motion. I do agree for motion we need the number, but at least to discuss and continue with the order of the day. Yeah. And I think the Speaker has got that prerogative to alter. But notwithstanding that, I think it's a very bad reflection of what is transpiring.
The 28th was actually discussed through the forum of the whips, agreed upon, the agenda was agreed upon, and that is the agenda item we have for today. Now you are asking me to improvise now around that, but again, first and foremost, we discussed this informally. We agreed. Once we agreed on the routine of the business of the day, to ask the Speaker now to reorder that. You are now, it could have been ideal if it was done in advance, but really, it shows you that it is a bit messy. I wish, now if the members are in the hospital, we do have a provision to allow people in the hospital to be transported for obvious reason. But given the fact that nobody knows exactly how soon they are going to be, anyway, can I suspend the arrangement to? Are they? Did you ring the bell? Yes, please.
Good afternoon, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I rise with a plea.
Yes.
If possible, why don't we break probably for 10 to 15 minutes, even if it is not provided in the rules, and come back thereafter, and every chief whip must look at these members who are here not to go home. Or we don't even need to go out of the chamber. I so submit, Honorable Speaker, for your consideration.
The only thing we can do is to ring the bell. Our rules are very clear on this one. If we break now, basically, it means that we are adjourning indefinitely, and there is no possibility for convening today. So that's my take. I fully understand, and I'm equally committed to wanting to make use of the time available. It's simply unbearable to have a second day or not be meeting on the account of the fact that members are not available. I think this is very sad indeed. And I agree with the Honourable Katamero. The comments that are reported in the media, what you have to say there is absolutely accurate. It's an accurate description of the situation that are totally should never be accepted. And I thought we are not going to have a repeat of this. Okay. Can you guide me? Can you guide me? What happened to our legal? Honourable members, Okay, can you ring the bell? But don't you have a phone, the chief whip? Can they not phone people? But the team. Okay. No shouting. You are in the chamber. You are in the chamber. This is the time you need to have a great sense of humor. You might be. No, we cannot. Did you ring the bell? I think 115. I adjourn the House until tomorrow. There's nothing. Yeah, there's nothing.
Be ashamed of yourself, National Assembly. Cease, man. Yes, I'll say it again. You've been elected by people, and this is how you work. I hope you don't come back. I hope you don't come back. You don't serve the people. You don't serve the people. Cease, man.
The House is still adjourned tomorrow.
Well, welcome back there again. As you've heard from the Speaker, for the second day in a row, Parliament, of course, getting adjourned to the next day because they are unable to meet the quorum of the number of members of Parliament that are required in order to hold the session legally. Well, yesterday we saw that there were about 10 members of Parliament missing, and today another 2 members of Parliament missing. Of course, at the beginning of the session, the Speaker expressing his disappointment with how it has become a culture for members of Parliament to show up quite late at the House. while they're initially supposed to start at 2:30, the program usually commences at about 3 o'clock. Of course, the speaker expressing his disappointment there as well. What a completely embarrassing turn of events, an indictment on the sanctity of Parliament as an institution of the state. It's something which has never happened before, and it's now 2 consecutive days that this has taken place. I'm joined here by Ms. Chantal Hasselman from PwC, of course, here to assist us with analyzing the statement that we are not seeming to be getting to.
Yes, Ricardo, we continue to have opportunity in terms of just dissecting what we can expect. Positive in it is that it's an important conversation, so I guess that it also attracts attention, and I trust that through what we experience that there's now more focus, as well as once the budget is tabled, that a lot of good conversation can come through.
Definitely, of course, it still doesn't take away from the importance of the midterm budget review here as well. And I'm pretty sure that there are different pockets of society, particularly private business, etc., that are waiting to hear what the minister will have to say. Hopefully, we meet those numbers tomorrow. We have a quorum, and then we have the conversation. But before we close off, just from your side, what is the 1 or 2 highlights, the big ones that you are looking forward to tomorrow?
In terms of the current drought conditions, one would like to see how the budget addresses the state of affairs. And then in terms of also further department allocations, in order to see how that speaks to needs that were expressed by the social sectors. And very briefly on the tax front, that what was mentioned in February was a potential reduction to SMEs in terms of the corporate tax they paid, which will be a big relief to our smaller businesses. So important to see if that is re-mentioned and if there's anything about the timing to that.
Well, stay with us. We're going to continue with this, but we'll quickly go for a short break before we wrap up the conversation this afternoon. Stay with us.
The government should concentrate more on the Ministry of Poverty Eradication, hence that Namibia is really living in a very interdimensional poverty state, should I say, and also looking forward to things such as implementing a basic income grant, which will help us to eradicate poverty in Namibia. And also, I mean, like, things like implementing the basic income grant will really help, not only eradicating poverty, but also like the youth in so many things, people from rural areas and such. And also on education, I think there is so much improvement that we need, that the government can do with a budget on education, such as mostly in the rural areas. Those people really don't have the privileges or advantages we in urban areas do have, such as having sufficient classrooms or chairs to sit and all that.
The government should focus on the Ministry of Education. Especially you find schools in the Kunene region where the infrastructures are not well equipped to accommodate or for the students or learners that side. So I think if they focus also on Ministry of Education when it comes to infrastructure, textbooks and all those things, it will really mean a lot for a Namibian child, because that's a Namibian child's education.
Investing more money in factories. Like our raw material, most of them are going out of the country. And if they could do that, then that will improve our employment rate. That's what I think they must allocate more fund on those ones. Another thing maybe schools. That's one of, you find some classrooms in some school have plus minus 50 learners. So why can't they actually build schools, and we have a lot of teachers who are sitting at home, qualified teachers, don't have jobs. So yeah, education is also one of the most important sectors that they can invest into.
I actually propose that the focus should actually be on the youth, on the youth development. Surely there's a lack of sufficient resources regarding the youth initiatives. The other area that also needs a bit of improvement or more support is actually education. Because we keep on talking education is the power. Education, kids need to go to school, but we need to speak to with sufficient resources as well to ensure that equitable education is implemented. And of course, that will be able to have access or provide adequate access to equitable access to education for the Namibian child.
On the hala unene dengere po Ministry of Health. Atuiki pangero kakunomiti. Otoporo kamba pira okarandeke private pharmacy, which is very expensive. Otara ali baturi maruamo Ministry of Education, Poverty and Eradication. Samo uno na veto very venerable wamo FNs mara katne kuchonge ipi kuniyemo yasha o tuiki kolerango nemo Ministry of Gender o haitu register na yote tupengo 350 o hainingi poshango shidurife eshi iyo monosha o haivatere shidurife yo shikwa naturally maruamo Ministry of Youth shasha youth omeke trimestre tamu katunashironga katunasha tuningi na tuvaterengo nando shimango like a youth unashu wirongera tupenda ndo shimali wa ukivaterengo nando ondoka business akashaura ndini mawepo njeto ko shimali wa urandini mawepo ngo business ayiko mesho opongo tutetu epangero na tete pokati nando atukonjishironga ndeka tuiwete shango amona sheke shidurifeshi ko nasho sheke ndaro kuchasha.
Welcome back. We're still coming to you from the courtyard of the Parliament of the Republic of Namibia. Very, very unfortunate turn of events. Embarrassing, for lack of a better word, especially looking at the kind of institution that we're sitting at right now. For the second time in a row, unable to meet the quorum. That is, of course, the 49 members of Parliament that are required to hold the session where the Minister of Finance and Public Enterprises is supposed to have been presenting the midterm review statement, the midterm budget review statement this afternoon. The Speaker of Parliament adjourning it for the second time. Of course, they had to wait for 2 members past the legally allowed time, and then again, one last member still missing when it was about 45 minutes past the required time that the session is supposed to commence in any event. But nonetheless, we will be speaking to the Speaker of Parliament, who has addressed and of course mentioned his dismay at the behavior of the members of Parliament in terms of their conduct. But we'll hear from him what this means, something quite unprecedented for the first time happening in this nature. We will be hearing from him a little bit later on in as far as what they can do from the side of the parliamentary administration. But for now, even though, of course, this is still taking place here, we are here for one good reason, and that is the midterm budget review statement from the Minister of Finance. Yesterday, we had a brief chat to just inform us around the importance of the midterm budget review statement and where it falls in the overall state administration apparatus. Let's really take a listen into this interview. When we come back after this, we will be speaking to the Speaker of Parliament. Perhaps, Honorable Minister, before you go in. Good afternoon and thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me. Of course, you will obviously hear the breaking news when I'm in the chamber. But just to give you a gist of what we are doing here today, the midterm budget is really an opportunity for us as government to review the budget we have tabled at the beginning of the year and see what emergencies cropped up during the year. So that we can deal with those emergencies, because emergencies cannot wait for the next financial year. So for instance, you know that we now have enough information about the gravity of the drought. That requires more resources, so we'll have to allocate resources to the efforts to combat drought. So there are some other emergencies that we have to look at. It's not a new budget, it's basically a reallocation of resources to emergencies.
Of course, looking at this as well, just a brief reflection, I think, Honourable Minister, on the importance of this juncture within the annual year of government finance, and how important this sort of reflection is in the scheme of leadership and governance in general.
It's important on two scores. One, first of all, we are in the mid-year of the financial year, and therefore it's important to take stock as to how far did we go with regard to the implementation of the priorities that we funded with the budget, so that we can, if we are falling behind on some areas, we can up our games. Yeah, that's one. The second thing is, as I said before, is to understand what are the areas of priorities that need more resources. Because when you remember, when you are budgeting for the future. You don't know exactly what is going to happen during the year. So now that we are half a year through, so we have more information about things that urgently need resources, and therefore this is an opportunity for us to address those priorities.
We know generally that the government budget cycle runs for about 3 years with the midterm expenditure framework.
Yeah.
Even if you do a midterm review of this nature, how much flexibility or room do you have to maneuver with the reallocations?
Well, we don't do, this is not another budget, so we don't budget twice in a year. We only budget once in a year. And therefore we mustn't look at the midterm as another budget. The midterm is basically a review of where we are and a review of priorities, of emergencies. Otherwise, the budget will remain the same as it was tabled in February this year. But things that cannot wait, unfortunately, will have to be funded, and therefore we'll see where do we have resources that were not that were allocated at the beginning of the year but are not going to be spent, so that we can reallocate those resources to the needy areas. So it's not a new budget. It's a reallocation when there are additional resources to fund those priorities and those emergencies.
Honourable.
Aligning the budget with what's happening on the ground, because a lot of times when the budget is being formulated in Parliament, they don't really address issues that people in rural areas are facing, like the lack of roads, infrastructure development, like a story like that took place in Rundu, where the school is not connected to this main sewage system of the town. Those are the things that really people need urgent attention to. So I think maybe just better planning from the side of the government, and also maybe working on how they will implement these funds that are allocated to different ministries to make sure that the money is used for what it's meant to be used for and not returned next year again.
I think they have to review the budget so they can also see on healthcare, where especially in the rural areas, because there's a lack of healthcare in the rural areas, because they are mostly focusing on the development of urban areas, and they are not seeing what's actually happening deep down in the rural areas. If they can have a task team or task force, they can go do research. I think they've been doing that, but is it effective enough? Is it effective enough to really see what are the major challenges the country is facing at the moment? Because at the end of the day, we want a Harambe country as well. So we need to really see on the healthcare aspect as well. Thank you.
With the 376.3 million that was allocated for education this year, I personally, as a student myself, don't think that budget is enough. I think that the budget should be increased when reinstated again, so that it stops the inconveniences that us students go through or have been going through the academic year of 2024. So with regards to NASFAF specifically in terms of the budget. So yeah, that's what I think.
As a citizen in Namibia, I feel like the budget reviews doesn't really cater to the homeless people out there. And like as a citizen, I feel like we should cater to them more, and based on the school budgets, because like based on most students are self-funded these days and not all of them have NASFAF, and I feel like they should also drop the points a bit so more students can get NASFAF. So the budget should also be allocated towards the NASFAF students and more towards the homeless people.
The government must also like cater for the hospital, because the hospitals right now don't have medicine, and people currently fall sick and then they only give medicine that don't really help. feel me? And there are also homeless people that need like food and also packages that the government can help us with or help the people with.
I think the budget should be more focused on the educational part of Namibia due to there's a high rate of unemployment, and for the government to focus more on the educational part, this gives our Namibians the opportunity to get knowledge and the skills they need in order to get work, in order for our tax rates to lower themselves a bit, and in order for us as a Namibian nation to actually grow.
O Ministry of Poverty o papungana na kutara wale hapo shashanuva hapo o very mostrita kabena hitavali mara o budget ayo ya pitanga ho keshe fimbo taka karata apitifali o budget a modura taia o Ministry of Poverty na itarwe na rera opo ikwafele o street vulnerable and street kids. About Ministry of Education also, they need to add more on that ministry, because as parents, like for me as I'm talking, I have 4 children, but I cannot afford to buy stationery for them, and we would like that budget of Ministry of Education to be more so that they can also be providing stationery for our kids.
Oh, well, it seems like the bug is catching everybody at this stage. But nonetheless, welcome back. Still coming to you live from the Parliament. We have just seen the Speaker of Parliament adjourn the session due to lack of quorum for a second day in a row. Particularly worrisome because the National Midterm Budget Review Statement is supposed to be have been delivered yesterday and today, and is now postponed for the second time. We're going to get some voices and insights from some of the members themselves, and of course, hopefully, also speak to the Speaker before we close off today's session. I'm now joined by a member of the official opposition representing the Popular Democratic Movement, Honorable Ina Hingari. Good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for making time out to be with us.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for having me.
I don't know, how do I interpret this as a young Namibian? Members of Parliament not showing for work. I think let me start there. How do I interpret? How do I?
Well, I think I speak as a young person as well, and as a young Namibian citizen who is eager not only to make change, to make laws, but also to participate in what we call democratic processes of this country. So it is not only frustrating, but also a disappointment, I believe, to many young people across the country who have kept an ear out for what is to be expected from this particular budget review, mid-year budget review, and also really what their place is at the table.
At the beginning of the session, the Speaker, of course, pointed out and lamented the fact that he was really disappointed in the conduct in general of the members of the House coming in, the times that they're coming in, using that 30-minute that's given, of course, before the House can be adjourned. What is your feeling around and your reaction to that opening statement by the Speaker?
Well, I think I was happy that the Speaker made that decision and that particular announcement, actually, because even earlier this year, when we were reviewing our rules, our standing rules and orders and internal arrangements, one of the issues that really came up is that for a very long time now, and not just this year, coming in from 2020 when we were sworn in as members of Parliament, up to now, we've really been struggling with quorum. It's not the first time that Parliament had to be adjourned, but perhaps it is something that is now making headlines because there's a budget of an entire country that is basically on hold because members are not present. But I do think it's an issue that we have consistently, especially those of us on the opposition bench, have really lamented over the past couple of years. We have raised these issues, not only with the Speaker, but also with the Committee on Privileges. But I think when you look at our parliamentary system, for example, I do think that there's an urgent need for us to establish what is termed a parliamentary service commission. As it stands now, there is no stable, something that is particularly, that holds authority to hold members of parliament to account. So usually it's parliament, the speaker, members are then referred to a joint committee on privileges, and that's where they have to answer for wrongdoing and so forth.
But in terms of accountability on a day-to-day administration, I mean, for example, in a situation like this, the members are told well ahead of time. Each party has their caucuses. You're all informed the session is going to take place, particularly if a special session is called. I mean, where is the gap in terms of at least just informing the parliamentary administration well ahead of time, or the chief whip, which I think the responsibility sits with, to inform the administration if the party members are not going to be present?
You see, the issue is that even when those members are alert, say for instance administration or parliamentary staff or the secretariat, that they won't be here, what does it mean? It doesn't mean that the person can appoint a proxy to go and vote for them. It actually brings us back to a situation where even if you are excused for that particular session, there won't still be a quorum. So I do think that there are a number of loopholes, honestly. If you look at, for example, other countries, there is a period within which parliament is supposed to be in session, right before your election, and especially during an election year. There's also a period within which parliament is not supposed to sit, is not supposed to have a responsibility to pass a budget, for example, that is of this importance just in 1 week or 4 days. It doesn't make sense. So it goes back to an issue of our transition period and the amount of time that we give to Parliament and parliamentarians to deal with crucial issues. For instance,
but for that they have to show up, no?
For sure, they have to show up, but it also doesn't make sense that I have excused myself and I've gotten some sort of response that allows me to stay away from Parliament, and yet there's no quorum. The issue here is that in fact, there are members sometimes who come to Parliament, who make for Parliament or those parliamentary sessions, but do not have voting rights. So the issue is not necessarily whether you have enough members in Parliament or who can come. The issue is that there's a distinction between voting members of Parliament and ordinary members of Parliament who do not have any voting rights.
Well, your parting message to the Namibian nation that has been eagerly waiting for the last 2 days to hear from the Minister of Finance.
Well, I think we should just remain patient. I believe the Speaker, in his conscience, will come back to us and will probably afford members of this House and members of the citizenry at large some sort of period as well where we can really have enough time to discuss the budget. I don't think, and this is my conviction, I don't think that 1 week is enough, even if it's a mid-year review budget. I don't think that it is enough to discuss a budget of this importance, especially going into elections, in just 4 days.
Thank you very much, Honorable Hengari, for making time out to join us.
Thank you so much for having me.
There we go. Of course, that's the representative of the opposition in Parliament, PDM, Member of Parliament, Ina Hengari, just talking to us about her reaction to the events of the last 2 days. Of course, we continue to engage some of our members of Parliament, and now I'm joined by Honorable Minister of Mines and Energy, Honorable Tom Alwindo, to just reflect a little bit on the events of the last 2 days. Good afternoon, and thank you for making time out to be with us.
Ricardo, and good to see you again. Haven't seen you in a long while.
It's great to be back here as well. I just wanted to just start off first with some of the remarks that well, you were present yesterday. Let's start there for yesterday's session as well, and of course again for today's session. But for the Speaker, of course, just as he started with the session this afternoon, lamenting his disappointment in the general conduct of some of the members of the House when it comes to attending sessions on time. Let's perhaps start with your reaction to his position.
I think, I mean, the Speaker's reaction, I guess, is all of us who knew and understood that we needed to come back to Parliament. It was something that was already announced way ahead of us, to say there's this important agenda item that we need to dispose of, which is the midterm budget. And therefore, it wasn't like it was a surprise that suddenly we need to go back to Parliament. We all knew about this Parliament. Yesterday we came and we couldn't make a quorum. And again, we were all told to say, no, that make sure that, the next day we're coming back and let's make sure that we have a quorum. And surprisingly, again, we didn't have a quorum. So I can only really say this is really just not how people expect us to behave as lawmakers, and therefore I don't know how to make out of it. It's just not something acceptable that I think we should behave this way.
Well, the continuous questions around accountability and how members can be held accountable always keeps coming up. Previously, just now, one of your members of the House mentioned the issue around a Parliamentary Service Commission. And it really brings around the question that whether it's in the administration or between the parties, where do we look in terms of improving the processes for accountability for parliamentarians? Because clearly it's not the first time that this has happened.
I think for me, I would rather argue to say if you make yourself to be a member of parliament, to represent the people who sent you to parliament, who have elected you, I don't think you really need to have some other structures to make sure that you come to do your work as a member of parliament. And if you are going to need some sort of a commission, that commission cannot be to make people to come to parliament. I mean, I have already agreed and to come to have this. I looked for this job. Just like now, we are all busy campaigning, looking for this job to come back again. I really don't think it's something that you need to have somebody else to force you because you willingly accepted this, this position to come to parliament. It's really just all of us need to just look at it and why am I here? And I can understand there are sometimes really legitimate reason why an MP cannot be in parliament. I mean, that's to be understood. It's not to say everybody stay away simply because they don't want to do their work. There are sometimes really reasonable, reason why. For example, I might be on another, official duty, especially outside of the country, and therefore I might not be able to come. But where it is now known to say this is a kind of an urgent matter to deal with those of us who are in the country, we all just were supposed to make sure that we are back here in Parliament.
My concern really, Honourable Anwilno, is just what we communicate about the sanctity of the institution. Third branch of government, of the state, legislature, a very, very important institution within the architecture of the state of the Republic of Namibia as we know it. And what we are communicating particularly to a lot of the young people, a lot of the young parliamentarians, some of them which are even poised to potentially be part of this House in the next administration. My concern is really just what we are communicating to the public, the showing our standing globally on this matter. What are your reflections on that?
Well, I can only agree to say, we as leaders, as members of parliament, we need to set a good example of how to behave or how to deal with a responsibility when given to me. And when you say, especially for the young people, I have to tell you, you also have got young parliamentarians who are supposed to be in that parliament, and they were not there. So it's not probably just because of the age differences, but for me, just like if you accept the responsibility, make sure that you act according to what you've accepted. And if we continue to to behave this way, it's simply making people to start to doubt our commitment to what we have agreed to do. And I hope we have agreed to sit tomorrow again. I hope tomorrow those who are within the country, they will be able to come again so that we can conclude this discussion.
And then just lastly, I think finally there was, of course, and I know it's not directly related to the adjournment of the quorum, the adjournments that have taken place over the last 2 days. But there was, of course, also just general talk around once the elections have done, the new parliamentarians are going to be elected, but we're still expecting to see the current members of parliament sit again in February. The issue around that continuation. Just as your parting thoughts, what are your thoughts on that? Just as you're stepping down from this conversation.
Well, one can only hope that what we have seen over the last 2 days for people not pitching. I hope we would again understand that we still have got time to serve as members of parliament, and we still got items on the order book that need to be dispensed with. And maybe the reason why is that people are busy campaigning, and hopefully then after the campaign, we'll have no excuse not to come back and make sure that we finish the order paper that we had ahead of us. So that's really what I'm hoping that's going to happen.
Honorable Albundo, thank you very much for making time to join us, and hopefully we'll see you again tomorrow in the House.
Yeah, certainly going to be here tomorrow again. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We continue to just get some reactions from the members of Parliament, but I understand the Speaker of Parliament is on standby, going to join us now as well. If you've just joined us, we're coming to you live from the courtyard of Parliament, second day in a row, adjournment of Parliament due to the fact that a quorum could not be met in order to allow for the midterm budget review statement to be delivered by the Minister of Finance. And now we've got the Honourable Professor Peter Kashavivi joining us, the Speaker of Parliament, to just reflect on overall parliamentary administration and what this kind of events mean for us. Very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much, Speaker, for making time out to join us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we're seeing what has happened now, of course, 2 days in a row, particularly where we have such an important item on the order. In your experience, is this something new? Is this general conduct?
This is absolutely not the usual, very unusual. We never had experience like this happening a day after following another day. So I was a bit really taken back. I knew about what happened yesterday, and I expected most of the members to be in the House, knowing the fact that we have adjourned to commence on the 28th of October, and knowing the fact that it's just one item on the agenda. So I was convinced that we'll be able to deal with that. But I've already expressed myself on this. I expressed my displeasure. And it is something that one doesn't want to have it repeated again. There are exceptional cases. It's an election year. Everybody is busy up and down the country. And I'm assuming that some of those members have been out of town campaigning. But it is not a sufficient excuse.
But was there enough notice? I mean, because then it brings us back to the question around, okay, it might be very basic, but for the layman on the street, was there enough time between the MPs being informed and the actual days that the sittings are taking place? Were they informed early enough?
All members of Parliament were informed in advance that we adjourned a couple of weeks ago, and we are going to commence on the 28th of October. And we only have one item on the agenda, the midterm budget review, that we needed to deal with. So there is no excuse whatsoever.
The question around accountability is also a big one. We know, of course, generally right now that Parliament does its administrative work, and much of the disciplining and the conduct is being handled by the political parties themselves. That's why we have the chief whips. Many are saying that maybe we need another structure to enhance accountability for parliamentarians, such as a public service commission.
That's
Parliamentary Service Commission, pardon me.
Members of Parliament are known as honorable members. It means that you carry extra responsibility. You are accountable to the public, to the nation as a whole. You are a lawmaker. All these things constitute a heavy responsibility on the part of the members of Parliament. And therefore, they have, within the various party structures, they have people who are known in Parliament as chief whips of various political parties that are represented in Parliament. Those are the people who are responsible for day-to-day activities of each party, responsible for its members in Parliament. And therefore, they are expected to make sure that their members are available when they are required. So I really don't believe that there will be any extra body that should be assigned to looking after members of Parliament. I think what we need to do is maybe to revisit the role of the whips. Make sure that these are people who are at a certain level within the various individual political structures who carry particular weight, who are able to impress upon the members to account. For example, no members of parliament should be leaving parliament to go abroad without notifying the office of the chief whip. These are the mechanisms that are in place that we believe are sufficient to make sure that members actually account for their time and are available when they are needed to be available in the House.
In terms of that, I think one of the other questions, of course, really is just when we started off with the session, you had lamented at how this conducting is becoming a regular feature. You said that historically, at 2:30 you start, but now you're seeing most of the sessions starting exactly within that loop of that allowable 30 minutes gap that's being brought here. And it brings me to the question, really, in your experience now with this current group of members of parliament, do they understand the responsibility? Do they understand the sanctity of the institution in which they are working, or are they just coming to collect salaries? Is this just a regular job for them?
I will not go as far as that, but I will simply confine myself to responding to that important question. And that is, when I started as a member of parliament here, first as a member of the Constituent Assembly, we used to start precisely on time, 2:30. But I've been witnessing a process whereby we seem to be drifting slowly to a point where we are now beginning to squeeze in our meeting just before 3 p.m. And this is a kind of a trend that I consider to be unacceptable, and I hope members have taken note of some of the suggestions that I've been making. I'm not complaining for the sake of complaining because I'm sitting there as a speaker, but I feel we have a collective responsibility to adhere to the rules of the National Assembly, the Parliament, and also to make sure that we are accountable for the time we spend here. If we are supposed to be here at 2:30, we should be on time precisely to get on with the work. I think we don't need to be reminded we are who we are, lawmakers, and so therefore we should be exemplary to the public out there.
Well, there were some suggestions of improvising and so on while we were waiting for the 2 additional members to come in there as well. And I mean, it makes one question, if you sit back and say, these are the rules that have been established, lawmakers are supposed to be upholding this at the highest level. And it brings around concerns also around, okay, if we are thinking about improvising here, what is the next thing that we are improvising on?
Improvising is the term I use in the process because I was trying to inject a sense of humor. Basically, if we are told a member of parliament, honorable member, is being rushed from a particular hospital to come to the house for the purpose of making up the quorum, all of us in the house will be understanding that the fact that member is making an effort to facilitate the sitting of parliament in order to add to the number that is required. So these are the rules that we are utilize for the purpose of facilitating a meeting to make sure that the quorum is met, and you are told by ringing the bell, you are told that the ambulance is rushing to the house, bringing that number to add the number of those who are already in the house. These are things that are done by many parliaments. If a particular parliament is confronted by an urgent bill that needed to be secured by the required number, sometimes these things are done. But again, we don't need to go as far as that. We are not in the middle of an emergency, and therefore it was the most unfortunate not to be able to meet again for the second day because we are missing 2 members. But again, we have made the necessary arrangements. We are reconvening tomorrow, taking our laws into account to make sure that in the event of having a particular challenge, we will be applying our rules in such a way that this particular episode will not be repeated tomorrow.
Well, looking at that as well, in terms of the options that are before you, the option was there to, of course, suspend it altogether, but now it's adjourned until tomorrow. Let's reflect a little bit just on the flexibility that the rules allow for this sort of decision making.
This is a midterm budget review that it's like any other bill. Require us, and we have made it clear that we are not taking any other item. It was a single item on the order paper that we need to deal with. So there was no leeway to bring other issues in order to buy time in the meantime. It was the only time, the issue that we got to commence the sitting of Parliament. And in the absence of the required number, we were left with no alternative by way of improvising or whatever, and we simply have to adjourn the House until tomorrow, as the rule requires. So there are limitations as to what you can do, particularly if you are following your rules to the letter. Because in this case, if we had a normal sitting, we could have continued until we have the number. But due to the fact that it was a single item on the agenda, it left us with no alternative but to let go.
I think quite an important conversation also going on right now in the contemporary mainstream national discourse is just around the modernization of some of our state institutions and how they function. You know, the issue around the digital democracy, for lack of a better word. Some might argue and say, okay, but I mean, if we can't have all of the parliamentarians present physically, if we are able to make board decisions virtually, why can't we have a virtual access to Parliament for parliamentarians? I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
That is a good one. It's a good one. It's actually included in our rules, provided you make arrangements. You basically sign in. If we had that sort of arrangement where members were committed, were signing, linked to the sitting of the National Assembly today, we could have been able to commence the sitting. But there is no guarantee that if we could have, there was no time to make that kind of arrangement. These are things that had to be done in advance to ensure that you can count on that member being available, having signed in. But in the absence of such, there was no such a possibility.
So what happens, it's part of my final question for the conversation, if we don't meet a quorum tomorrow again?
Honestly speaking, sometimes you don't rule out such a possibility, but given the arrangement we've made now, we have looked at the rules. We will be applying our rules in such a way that that possibility is not likely to affect the sitting tomorrow. I've consulted the whips in the normal way, and I'm confident the meeting will commence tomorrow, and I'm confident the midterm budget will be dealt with in accordance with the rules.
Honorable Speaker, thank you so much for making time out to join us this afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
Speaker of the Parliament of the Republic of Namibia, Honorable Professor Peter Kashavivi, of course, long-time scholar and also civil servant, just reflecting a little bit on the work of the Parliament at the back of this adjournment that took place 2 consecutive days where the national midterm budget review was supposed to be delivered and unfortunately was not delivered. You've heard from the Speaker himself. There's not much to say from our end that they will be commencing with the sitting. We will be back here again tomorrow to try to bring you that midterm budget review. Of course, an important item on the calendar of state administration, and of course also on the work that Parliament has to do, where they review and realign the priorities and reallocate some of the public funds in far as the needs are arising in the middle of the financial year. On that note, that's it for us with our broadcast this afternoon here from Parliament. We'll be back again tomorrow afternoon. Please tune in from 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We'll be coming to you to get some reactions, expectations, and of course deliver to you the midterm budget review statement from the Minister of Finance. My name is Ricardo Gnagosep, and myself and the crew here at Parliament. It's bye-bye.